As a vegan business owner, it's absolutely essential to have good cash flow. And yet, it's not always easy. In today's episode, expert Heather Zeitzwolfe, who is a vegan, she's a CPA, she talks about cash flow management, financial forecasting, budgets, she's a money coach, and she gives profit advising, is going to share with us strategies that help companies to stay afloat. So stick around.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
Well, Heather, I am so excited to invite you on the Vegan Visibility Show, where we focus on vegan businesses that want to grow their market reach. They want to increase their revenues. And that's actually something that you're kind of an expert at, is money. Why don't you share with the folks listening and watching what it is you do and what you see as some of the greatest mistakes that entrepreneurs make?
Sure. I work with a variety of businesses, mostly people that are in service, but I do work with other vegan clients that do things besides services. And I, as a CPA, you see a lot of different mistakes being made, but there's some common threads out there, especially for solopreneurs. And one of the biggest problems that I have found is that people in business don't treat their business like a business. They forget that they're in business. They start this out because they are passionate about what they do, especially people that are vegan business owners. They're super passionate about what they do, but they forget that at the end of the day, they're supposed to be making money and they're supposed to have profit coming in for themselves and for the charities that they want to support.
It's so interesting because actually this morning when I was on my run, I was thinking about that, about treating a business like a business. I've had mine 27 years. And it was when the pandemic hit, I started really evaluating what direction do I want to take my business in? Because truth be told, when the pandemic hit, a big part of my business just fell off the face of the earth. I'm a keynote speaker. And as we know, conferences shut down. And I had to step back and evaluate, okay, where are my revenue streams coming from? What do I need to do to compensate for what just happened? And it didn't just happen to me, it happened to a lot of people. And one of the things that I've advised my clients for years on is that you've got to treat your business like a business, which means you have to have a business license, you have to pay your taxes, you have to pay yourself. That's a big one where a lot of people don't pay themselves, or they just don't have any real plan of how to establish themselves as an entrepreneur. So what is your recommendation to people, especially within the vegan world? Because that's the area that I'm focusing on 100% now, want to really help people to grow their businesses. And what would you say is a great way to treat a business like a business?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So you did hit on one thing that I would like to talk about, and that is to have a plan, a backup plan for if things go haywire, which we have seen with COVID. So have some emergency funds in place. So be sure to always, when you're making money, set money aside for taxes. Don't forget that one. That's a big one. People forget that they have to pay taxes. And set money aside for an emergency, because if something happens to the world and you can't make money, you need to be able to live. So you have to think about all your business expenses and also all of your home expenses as well. You have to be able to pay your mortgage, or your rent or whatever it is. So those are two big things. Another is, please pay attention to your books. A lot of people, they start a business, they're not really thinking about bookkeeping, but big companies, of course, they're thinking about this, but small businesses, they don't think about this until tax time. And when I have them gathering up their tax information, it's like they're scrambling to give me their numbers. And that's not the way it should be. You should be looking at your numbers constantly. You can't make decisions in your business if you don't know where your numbers are at. So that is a huge one. So always you have to have your finger on the pulse of your business. So if you're going to treat it like a business, please do that. So here's another issue that I see with people when they're not treating their business like a business. They commingle their funds. Now, what happens is they will take out a bank account, maybe a business bank account, And then they'll go to the store and they'll say, "Oh, I don't have my regular credit card. I'll just put it on my business card." And then now they start using that, and now it's commingling. So the bookkeeper has to go through and clean all that stuff out. But if you aren't even working with a bookkeeper, then what happens is you've got all this stuff commingling. Now you really don't know where your business is at, because
Right.
you've got a mixture of business and non-business, which needs to be sorted out. Another problem could be that you decide to just buy business supplies or travel expenses or whatever on your own card rather than your business. And now again, you have to make sure that those entries go in, because at tax time, you want to be able to deduct those. And as someone who helps people with their taxes, I see this where I'm like, aren't there more deductions? I thought you did some traveling or whatever, and now they're scrambling to find where that was on their credit cards so they can deduct that. So,
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because actually we do our books every single month and they go to our accountant, and then we do quarterlies. We really have it set up to where at the end of the year, I'm not panicking. And when it's tax time, I'm not panicking, because that's what I pay my accountant for, is she can take the stress away from me. And, this whole thing of commingling, in some cases, commingling in life is a good thing, but in other cases, when it comes to our money, not a good thing. So I want to remind people that you're listening to the Vegan Visibility Show. This is Kathleen Gage, and I'm talking with Heather Zeitzwolfe, and she helps businesses to establish a rock solid foundation so that they're not building their business as a house of cards and it's going to collapse at some point. And I really liked what you said about putting money aside for those emergency situations, because that, everything you're recommending, we've done in our business. And had we not done that when the pandemic hit, and literally conferences just stopped, they came to a standstill, and money that we had projected as revenue, all of a sudden it wasn't there. Well, more than once I said to my accountant, thank God for savings. And, I mean that sincerely, because oftentimes people, they have their back against the wall and they have to make decisions differently than if they had that buffer. So what is your recommendation for creating a buffer account and separating the funds? That's really important. We have business checking, we have business credit cards, we have personal checking, we have personal savings, we have business savings, we have a tax account. We take a certain percentage out of all the revenue that comes in, and it goes into this tax account. And does it cost me more every month to have an accountant? Yes, it does. But at the end of the year, it actually saves me money, because my accountant is going to find those deductions that I may not know about. So what would you say? Let's start with how people can actually get that buffer account.
yeah. So the great place to start is start small. You have to start somewhere. So if it's putting aside 1 month worth of expenses, do that, and then build it up. You want to go 3 months, then go 6 months, but really ideally you want to have 1 year worth of expenses in the bank. Put that aside. And when I say that that's for your emergency fund, I mean that's for your emergency fund. That's not for your taxes. That's a different that's totally different. You should be putting money aside for that. So every time you get revenue in, think of it as a percentage of it's going to go towards tax, a percentage will go towards your emergency fund, and then make sure a percentage goes to paying yourself, because as a business owner, you need to be making money in your business. And then all of the other expenses. So, it's noble to feel like, oh, I've got to pay, I've got to pay all of my employees and all of that. But if you can't afford to pay yourself, I'm not so sure that you should be paying employees. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about, though, is making sure that you get help in your business. So I do want you to get help in your business, but I've seen it where people hang on to employees that they really can't afford. So if you are not tracking your numbers, you wouldn't know this, because you need to be tracking things. And with getting help in your business, if you are growing your business, you definitely want to get help in your business, but make sure that you can afford it and have a plan in place to put that person on the payroll. Don't just hire somebody.
I really want to dig a little deeper into that, because it's really interesting how oftentimes, like solo entrepreneurs, that they'll get a contract, and let's say it's a $10,000 contract, and there's going to be services that have to be rendered based on that contract, not just for what the owner is doing, but maybe there's copywriting that needs to be done, or maybe there's a web design that needs to be done, whatever it may be, whatever your services are. And one of the mistakes that I made early on in my business, and we started in 1994, is when I would get those really sweet contracts, I would try to do all the work myself instead of budgeting and saying, okay, if this is going to be a $10,000 contract and this is the outcome that the client wants, what percentage do I need to put aside in order to contract some of the, if you will, the busy work or the time-consuming work? Because if I can hire somebody at $50 an hour to take 10 hours off my plate and I can go get other contracts, that's a smarter thing to do rather than saying, okay, I'm going to do the 10 hours worth of work to save $500. And just signed a contract today where I had to sit down and really run the numbers and say, okay, what will it cost me to get the outcome for the client in order to contract this particular team member? And I have team members for just about anything. If I need somebody who does affiliate marketing, if I have somebody who sets up databases, web design, whatever it may be. And so the mistake I see a lot of entrepreneurs make is they try to do all the work themselves, thinking they're saving money. What's your take on that, Heather?
Yeah, I'm guilty of it myself because I will do things that I know that I should be paying other people. And this is one of my weaknesses, I know for sure, because for me to grow my business, I need to let go of my baby. And I really think, though, if you can afford to hire somebody to help you, you really need to do that, because otherwise you can't work on your business. You're just working in your business.
Right.
And as a business owner, you should be working on growing your business. And again, when I was talking about can't afford that, really look at, like you were talking about, what's the contract that you have coming in and what percentage of that can you pay others to help you with? It's the people that aren't looking at that kind of stuff that I see get into trouble.
Absolutely.
They're just hiring somebody and they're like hoping that it's going to cover the costs are going to be covered. So that's my thought on that. I definitely would get help, not just people doing things like virtual assistants, but also getting help from people like coaches, mentors. That's where you're really going to grow your business. I invest a lot in coaching myself because it pushes me into places that I wouldn't normally go. So I think not just hiring people to do marketing, admin type stuff, really think about you as an entrepreneur and growing your business. So I think that that's a great place where you can spend money because in the long term, you're going to reap the benefits from it. So I totally believe in
absolutely. Coaching. Absolutely, because I've had some of the best coaches literally in the world. I've had coaches that I've paid as much as one coach over a period of about a 2.5-year period. We invested well over $100,000 in that coach. And I have to say, a lot of what I learned at the time, not only did it generate money at that time, but now when things are literally upside down in the world, I can refer back to things I learned from this particular coach. I've belonged to masterminds. I'm a firm believer in masterminds. And, I want to kind of put a pin in our conversation about finances and running businesses. And I want to jump into your whole lifestyle as a vegan, and then we'll get back to the business side of things. But this is the Vegan Visibility Show. And I'm curious when you decided or when your life path took you down the road of being a vegan.
I love this question because I am such a passionate vegan. So in my youth, I sort of dabbled with vegetarianism every once in a while, and I would see things that PETA would put out, and I knew about animal suffering in factory farms, but I just turned a blind eye to it. It was like one of those things I never really thought about much. And then about 15 years ago, my husband and I decided, we want to get healthier, lose some weight. And I knew people that were vegan. We thought, let's just go vegan. We'll just do that at the New Year. So we gave up 1 week. I was never really a red meat eater. So we gave up chicken, and then we gave up fish, and I'm lactose intolerant. So the dairy part wasn't too hard for me. But so we did that week by week until it was January 1st. And then we were going completely vegan. And within probably about 20 days of it, my mindset shifted. There was this whole different feeling in my body, like my body felt better, but not only that, it opened my eyes. I was able to look at a vegan leaflet and actually understand the suffering that was going on with these animals. Something that I had seen these things before, but it just never resonated with me. I've never been an animal person. You wouldn't say that, like, I had dogs as a child or whatever, but I would never classify myself as an animal person. But soon after going vegan, my husband wanted to adopt a cat. And I was like, oh God, no, they scare me and all of that. Anyways, he brought home the cat. I fell in love with the cat. I am now a crazy cat lady. I have multiple cats, and seeing that cat's eyes and peering into that cat's eyes, I knew that I would never eat meat again, because I was so in tune with this cat. We used to, I would say, call it mind meld. We'd look into each other's eyes and mind meld. And now I think of all creatures like that. So there's no way I'm ever going to go back. I'm totally passionate about it. And I've been an activist for years for animal rights and human rights. And we can talk about some of those things that I've done, because that's fun. But I don't want to talk the whole time. So you can...
Well, no, that, you're my guest on the show. So we're here to hear from you. I mean, people hear from me all the time, but I love the fact that you're an activist. I just recently interviewed Jane Velez Mitchell, who is Jane Unchained. And one thing she encourages people to do is find your advocacy, find your activism, whatever that may be. For me, it happens to be that I'm a blogger. I have podcast shows, I write books. And so that's my activism. And actually beyond that, my wife and I, we do a lot of rescue, and she actually goes out and does rescue of endangered animals, and not endangered species, but endangered animals. And whether it be horses, cows, chickens, roosters, whatever it may be. And these are animals that are abused. And it's a really interesting process, but people are always shocked when I say horse rescue, and they're like, you mean horses get abused? It's like, oh my gosh, you would be shocked at what goes on with a lot of these animals. But with your activism, and before we talk about that, how do people get in touch with you, Heather? What's the easiest way for people to find you?
Sure. So if you go to Linktree and just look at Get the Balance Right, which is the name of my podcast, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, because there's all kinds of links in there. So I have links to my podcast, to my money coaching program, and to my accounting business, which is called Zeitzwolfe Accounting.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. And as far as the activism goes, so I'll tell you that my favorite activism now is through my cooking. I am totally a ninja in the kitchen, and I pride myself on being able to transform tofu like nobody's business. So when people taste my cooking, they are like, I can't believe this is vegan. Or, I love to invite non-vegans over. I used to do a large Thanksgiving spread, and mostly it was non-vegans there. They would come year after year. The party would get bigger just because the food was so delicious. So that's how I do my activism now. But years ago, I was part of the Radical Cheerleaders for Animal Rights. And that is the type of activism that I absolutely adore and I wish would come back. And so are you familiar with Radical Cheerleading?
No, never heard of them.
Okay. So Radical Cheerleading was something that came about, I think, in maybe the early 90s or the early 2000s. And it's basically peaceful protesting. It can be about any subject, where people are doing cheers. So rather than chants, they do cheers, and they actually get up and they either have homemade pom-poms or regular pom-poms and do the whole routines with these cheers. And so I was part of the Radical Cheerleaders for Animal Rights, which was in Portland, Oregon. And we did a lot of interesting things. We went into Lloyd Center shopping mall, where Scamp's pet store was at, and we did a demonstration against pet stores that were selling live animals, and they eventually closed that place down. So Scamp's went out of business. So I thought that was really cool. And we'd go to outside of like a McDonald's and do cheers. We would go to different events like the Fur Free Friday we always performed at. And so it was a great way of bringing this sort of positivity to something that is a very serious subject. So people would see us, and like non-vegans would see us on the street, and they're like, oh, what's this about? Because they think, oh, it's a performance. And they'd stop, and we'd be saying some very serious things like, talking about anal electrocution when it came to fur and stuff like that. But people were like, "Oh, look at this!" And we dress up kind of cute. We were all dressed in red and black, and it was really super. And over time, some of the members got pregnant, and we had men in the group too, but they went on to do different things. And so it's one of those things I would love to organize young women or young kids or whoever to do radical cheerleading, because I think it's such a cool way to protest.
I love that. And especially to bring awareness to situations that people don't realize are as destructive as factory farming, furring, puppy mill dogs. We actually rescued a puppy mill dog who showed up on our property. We're outside of Eugene, Oregon. We have 5 acres and we live near the river. And so oftentimes people will abandon their animals. And somehow this dog, which we didn't even know what kind of dog it was initially, it was in such bad shape, probably had never been bathed in its life. Turns out it was a miniature Shih Tzu. And it was about 10 years old, had rotted out teeth, infections in its eyes, tumors all over its belly. And we thought we were going to have to put her down. We had some blood work done. And as it turns out, her blood work came out good. So we actually put a lot of care and love into this dog. And what a lot of people don't realize is with puppy mill dogs, they are horrendously treated. They think, oh, it's such a cute little dog. And it's like, no. They live in a cage most of their life. She was actually flat on one side from laying in a cage all her life. And, there's so much that goes on that I think if one benefit of the pandemic happened, it's that people had the opportunity to really become much more aware about what's going on with factory farming, what's going on with our health around meat consumption. This whole thing with COVID, I think that people could really minimize their risk should they get COVID if they had a stronger immune system. And it's not just thinking, it's really been documented that the stronger your immune system, the less risk you have should you get COVID. And, I get so frustrated with a lot of the hype that goes on because they throw these numbers out in just about anything in life. They throw numbers out and people only grab on to that one part of a situation instead of digging deeper. Are you a vegan business coach, consultant, author, speaker, small business owner, or a nonprofit looking for ways to raise your visibility in the vegan world? Then visit veganvisibility.com. That's veganvisibility.com. For those of you who want to get on podcast shows, get the Vegan Visibility Directory with 135 vegan podcast shows that look for experts like you to appear on their show. Now, back to the show. Let's jump back into running an ethical business. When you work with companies, what is it that, tell us specifically what you do when you're working with entrepreneurs?
Sure. So I do work with non-vegans as well as vegans. So if you Google the vegan CPA, I come up. So I got some good SEO around that one. So it's very cool. So a lot of vegans do find me. But I usually work with people that are in a service industry. I help them with their taxes, tax planning, bookkeeping, and then I'm doing more money coaching. So I want to be able to help people year round. So it's not like, oh, it's tax time. Can you do my taxes for me? Like, okay, that's okay. But that's looking backwards at things. That's not projecting out what their business is going to be doing. So I decided to put in place some different offers where I can help people throughout the year. So I do advising for them. We'll look at putting together a business plan, looking at budgeting, it could be forecasting. When I was talking about payroll, I've helped my clients figure out when they can afford to hire somebody on payroll versus contractors. And then also, I'm not certified Profit First, but I do help people implement Profit First. So that's, if they're interested in that as well.
Profit First. Tell me what Profit First is.
Yeah. So Profit First it's kind of, I guess it's called an accounting system, but it really is not. It's just, the idea is that you pay yourself first in your business before paying for all of your expenses. So Mike Michalowicz wrote a book called Profit First. And so there's a lot of people that want profit first in their business. And it's a cool thing. There's just, some people are certified in that and they can advertise that they are profit first advisors. But I can implement profit first. So
excellent.
Yeah.
So let's just run some numbers here. Let's say that somebody is generating, we'll just use a real easy number, $10,000 a month. What can they figure is going to be their actual profit if they really operate on a streamlined budget? They're paying their taxes, they're, all of that. What can you help somebody project with something like that?
Well, it would depend on what else is going on in their business. So,
Okay.
I mean, at that, just saying $10,000, I would say, okay, 30% put that away for tax. It would depend, though, how much tax that they would have to pay. So without seeing their tax return and all of that, 30% would just be a general thing. People have to keep in mind, though, that there might be local taxes. So it's not just depending on their state. They might have state tax, they might have federal tax, and they might have local tax. So that's a general percentage. And then as far as other expenses go, it would depend on what they have to spend their money on. People also have to consider that if they have business loans, that they need to be paying those business loans out from that money that they generate. And loans are not a deductible expense. Only the interest is deductible. So you have to keep in mind, if you're paying down your loan, that's not an expense. So just the interest. And I don't want to get all like balance sheet profit.
Right. Even though you might think that conversation is sexy. Most people are like, balance sheets, no.
Yeah. So there's just a lot to consider. So without actually seeing what the person's situation is, it's really hard for me to say. And then there are different industries. So depending on your industry, the percentage that you take home based on your net income, it differs. So it depends on your industry. And yeah, so that's a kind of a loaded question. So
okay.
I don't know how to.
It is, and as soon as I asked, it was like, well, wait a minute, because it depends if you've got a brick and mortar. It depends if you're a service provider with no real overhead expenses because you're working out of your home, even though there are overhead expenses. I mean, let's be real about that. But and that's another reason for having a financial somebody who's in your financial corner is you may have deductions that you don't realize you have, and you could be missing all of that, especially now with everything just literally upside down. So where do you see, Heather, the future of the vegan business world, and where do you see things headed?
I see it growing. So that is such an awesome thing. I'm so super excited about all these things that I keep seeing popping up. The world of veganism has really changed since I went vegan, and it keeps growing and growing. I keep saying that we're taking over the world. And so to me, that's super exciting. I see new vegan companies starting up all the time, a lot of different supporting groups for veganism. And it's not just in America, it's all over the world. So I am connected with vegans that are in England, Scotland, Australia, Spain. Like there's all these different ones. And if you listen to my podcast, Get the Balance Right, I've interviewed some really interesting vegans that are in the marketing space. And so, yeah, I see it growing, which is really great. And it's not just about food products. It's also about other types of, whether it be vegan leather or I'm working with this woman who's got a vegan B&B. And so it's growing in all different places. So it's really exciting.
Wonderful. Well, there's a woman that I actually had on my show, and she's involved in a summit that I'm doing, Ginger Burr, and she is a vegan interior designer. And it's just phenomenal because you name it, and there's going to be somebody that's running a vegan business around it. So, well, Heather, it's been really delightful having you on the show. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people around just running a very successful business, around being vegan, and around just life in general?
Sure. I would say plan things out. Make sure that you plan it out, because with your business, you want to have time for yourself to do things, have time to go help out with the animals. So don't just be working constantly on your business. Just make sure that you plan things out. Use your calendar, do calendar blocking, and make sure that you have real goals that you can achieve in your business, but that push yourself. So all of those things I think are important. and just keep fighting for those animals.
I love it. I love it. Well, this is Kathleen Gage. You've been listening to Vegan Visibility, and I want to encourage you, go out, do what's right, eat healthy, eat consciously, look at what you're doing to the animals or not doing to the animals and the planet. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.